Ben 10 is a classic cartoon and one of the most loved ones. It has a total of 4 seasons and 52 episodes, and in this video, we're going to talk about it and explain it in detail from start to finish. So, let's get right into it.
Now he's got superpowers, he's no ordinary kid, he's Ben 10.
Ben 10 started with Azimuth on Galvan Prime Planet with his girlfriend Zenith. One night, they were hanging out and he noticed that the solar system is following continuously, which inspired him to create a sword, and that was the reason for Zenith breaking up with him, because he was so caught up in his work. In the war between planets, a knight stole the sword, which eventually destroyed his planet, so Azimuth got it back and took it to Earth during the Medieval Ages war against aliens. He gave it to George, an immortal knight, and he defeated the aliens using the sword, and that was the creation of the Forever Knight who protected the Earth from aliens. Azimuth created the Omnitrix to bring peace and union and apologize for what he did on the isolated planet Xenon by collecting all the aliens' DNA in space and putting it inside the green stuff. Now let's go back to Earth. In the 70s, an organization was created to help protect the Earth from aliens under George Washington's presidency, until the Plumbers Foundation took it over. In 1962, a pilot in the Air Force Army named Max Tennyson attacked a flying ship only to discover that it was actually an alien spaceship, which takes the form of a female human being. After saving the female alien, aka Verdona, who was chased by another alien, they fell in love. This girl was Ben and Gwen's grandmother, and this explains where Gwen got her powers from. He then met one of the plumbers and decided to become one of them and leave for space. And that was where he met Xylene and dated her for a while after handing her Vilgax the bad guy. Azimuth was finally done with the Omnitrix and asked Xylene to give it to the greatest plumber in the galaxy, Max Tennyson. But while transporting the Omnitrix, she was attacked by Vilgax after he ran away to get the watch. So she decided to send it to Earth. But instead of Max finding it, his grandson Ben did, because Max got older and retired from the plumbers. So while he was on a road trip across the country with Ben and Gwen, his granddaughter, the Omnitrix watch got stuck into Ben's hand while he was wandering in the forest on their first day of camping. And it's here where things start to get real. The very first alien he transformed into was Heat Blast. Vilgax got the watch's signals and sent soldiers after him. Using Diamond Head, Ben defeated the goons. See, because at that time, Vilgax had severe injuries, hence why he didn't show up. And from then on, Max and his grandkids fought aliens and villains the whole summer. They then rented a boat to go swimming and discovered that there was a kraken in the lake, so Ben had to fight it, only to realize that Jonah the fisherman stole the kraken's eggs, and that's why it was attacking them. They then headed to visit Aunt Vera at the retirement home and discovered that they are aliens and that they've been kidnapping the locals and taking their shapes, but in the end, they saved everyone. Vilgax kept trying to get the watch, so he sent 3 soldiers, and after a fight with Ben, one of the 3 aliens turned out to be Tetrax Shard. This guy was actually good and looked kinda like Diamond Head, and he actually decided to help Ben get rid of the other soldiers and became Ben's friend. Ben met Kevin for the first time when he helped him get the money out of an arcade game after he argued with his grandpa. Kevin used his absorption powers to steal, and when Ben confronted him, Kevin absorbed the Omnitrix's power accidentally and turned into an alien, but Ben managed to defeat him. Ben got in a fight with some criminals that led to his grandpa getting injured and going to the hospital. Vilgax also hired some criminals to get the Omnitrix, and while the soldiers were fighting with Ben, Vilgax communicated with Ben for the first time and told him that there is no escaping, even after he defeated his men. Hex, another villain, from whom Gwen got a charm after Ben defeated him, the amulet made her super lucky, and she named herself Lucky Girl. Hex tried to get the charm back, but Ben defeated him again, and Gwen let go of the charm's magic. Then we see Forever Knights for the first time, when Ben transformed into gray matter for the first time, couldn't go back to his human form, and was then kidnapped by a stranger who's obsessed with space. This stranger gave Ben to the Forever Knights, but Gwen and Max saved him. Now, we get to know Clancy. He's a man who was able to control insects, and he wanted to get revenge on the town's mayor because he wanted to destroy the building where he was living. Vilgax showed up after his wounds got healed and attacked Ben because, again, he wanted to get the Omnitrix. He kidnapped Ben and tried to remove the watch, however, he couldn't. Although Max warned Ben not to attack Vilgax, he went to Mount Rushmore to get some secret weapons from an old secret base that he used in the past to save Ben. In the meantime, Vilgax kept trying to remove the Omnitrix until Max debarked into the spaceship using his van, fought Vilgax, defeated him, destroyed the spaceship and Vilgax, and saved Ben. After defeating Vilgax, Max revealed all of his secret past to Ben and Gwen and that he was one of the Plumbers, which was an organization that deals with strange phenomenon on Earth. The kids also met Max's partner, Phil Billings, who was still working at the organization. Phil was a scammer and used a device that brought aliens from another dimension, hunted them, and then sold them for money. Next, a giant creature named Great One arrived on Earth and wanted to devour it, but Ben was still able to defeat it in the end. After that, crimes increased and they were committed by aliens that looked like Ben's, only to discover that it was actually Kevin trying to set him up with the police. They get into a fight on the Golden Gate Bridge that ended with Ben defeating Kevin, but not finishing him. Because of anger, Kevin turned into a freak of all the aliens and couldn't return to his human form. They fought again, but Kevin ended up losing and falling from the bridge. In episode 4 of the second season, we saw them in a different dimension where Gwen had the Omnitrix, but we're gonna talk about that later. Kevin came back to get revenge on them, and while fighting again, they get kidnapped by aliens to be used in ring fights. The two had to collaborate with each other to escape the spaceship and kill its leader while chained together. In the end, and while leaving the spaceship, Kevin tricked Ben and tried to kill him, but he escaped, left him on the spaceship, and went back to Earth. Ben and Gwen continued their adventures across the country while fighting villains over and over. Ben also managed to get some new aliens. In one of the adventures, they arrived at a camp and found a twin who was the last one in camp. Ben fought living plants and saved all the kids that disappeared, and it was there when Ben transformed into Wildvine for the first time. The Forever Knights also came back to get an antique mask, by which they can get to the Maya's strongest sword. Hex came back after getting freed by Charmcaster just to get revenge on Gwen and Ben. At the same time, Gwen got a bracelet from a witchcraft museum that made her once again lucky girl. The bracelet had the charms of Beazle on it. Hex wanted revenge and to get his charms and power back, but after a fight with Charmcaster, she tricked him and wanted to get all the power to herself. Gwen managed to defeat her and destroyed the charms, of which one was clearly still working. Now, we get to the part where Ghost Freak gets out of the watch. Ben was starting to have these weird and terrifying nightmares until Ghost Freak left the Omnitrix and tried to possess Ben's body and take over the world. He even threatened Ben by possessing Gwen and trying to throw her off the building. After a long fight, Ben figured out that the sun is the only way to defeat Ghost Freak and finished him. Animo got his hands on a piece of the Omnitrix after Ben messed with it and broke it. This twisted man used it to create alien-looking animals, and he even turned Max into a sticky worm. Kevin and Vilgax then decided to stand together against Ben after Kevin found Vilgax frozen in space. So together they fought Ben, and Max used the null void projector to send the two into the void. But Ben ended up getting sucked in with them as well. After a long, intense fight in the void, and after getting followed by Gwen who tried to save Ben, Gwen had to make the choice between his cousin and the watch, and he almost gave it up. But Gwen tricked them and changed the watch with an empty capsule. They then go out of the void, leaving Vilgax and Kevin there. Kevin ended up in the void's prison as an angry freak. He made a friend there who helped him control his emotions, and he really did learn how to start going back to his human form. The other prisoner had a plan to escape the prison through a tunnel underground. Kevin ran away, but unfortunately, the other prisoner didn't make it and was killed by the guards. Now we get to the third season. Max, Ben, and Gwen are still together, and we get introduced to Sublimino, the clown who hypnotized Ben and made him steal from banks. Charmcaster came back and exchanged bodies with Gwen accidentally, which led to Gwen and Charmcaster's body going to prison, but in the end, everything went back to normal jail, and the real Charmcaster ended up in prison. In the next adventure, they were on a desert road and reached a village where locals were celebrating Christmas. The dwarfs kidnapped Max and turned him into Santa Claus, and they also caught the kids and turned them into dwarves. The village was back in the 30s when the time had stopped, and all its people turned into dwarves. Luckily, they managed to get everything back to normal. On the road, they met a wolf-looking creature that tried to attack them. Ben was bit by that creature and started turning into a werewolf. The werewolf was actually an alien, and after Ben defeated him, gained him as one of his watch's aliens. The kids ended up in a video game called Sumo Slammer, and they had to pass all the levels to get out of the game. They also go to a family farm to try the countryside life, but instead, they found out that the cows turn into purple creatures. The reason for that was the Snarrow, whom they froze later on. The Tennysons also had to fight a crazy baseball coach who created roots to play in the game. Also, a crazy scientist created a weather-controlling device that created a monster, but again, everything ended well. Later on, they hear the news that NASA's space shuttle launch was canceled due to a purple storm, so they went to NASA and met a weird scientist called Victor, whom they discovered later to be helping Werewolf and Snarrow to revive Ghost Freak, whose plan was to use the shuttle and go back to space to block the sun and take over the Earth with darkness, which would allow Ghost Freak to transform all the humans to purple creatures. But after a long fight between Ben, Gwen, Max, Ghost Freak, Victor, and Snarrow, the Tennysons won, destroyed the shuttle, and went back to Earth. But before that, Ghost Freak attacked them once more. However, they did burn him with the sunlight. They then continue their journey and meet Xylene, who detected the Omnitrix's location and followed them. We then discovered that this alien was Max's girlfriend in the past, and she was the one who sent the watch to Earth after getting attacked by Vilgax, and that in fact, it was sent to Max and not Ben. Then, a robot tried to attack them, but of course they destroyed it, and Ben turned into Upchuck for the first time. Then we get to the 2007 movie Ben 10, Secret of the Omnitrix, when the watch turned on the self-destruct mode when Ben was fighting Animo. Tetrax received an alarming signal from the watch and decided to go with Ben to meet Azimuth, the creator. They couldn't find him, but Azimuth's assistant told them where he was, and after a very long journey where Ben thought he might have lost Gwen, they finally found Azimuth, and to their surprise, he didn't want to fix the watch. At the same time, Vilgax attacked them, and they got in a long fight where it turned out that Gwen was still alive and never gone. Azimuth then decided to fix the Omnitrix to help Ben win against Vilgax, and Ben also turned into Way Big for the first time and defeated Vilgax with him. In the first episode of the 4th and final season, Ben was chilling out on a normal day until he discovered he was inside of a dream made by the Forever Knights while they were trying to take off the watch. But he woke up from the dream and of course defeated them. Later on, Animo escaped from the prison and went to get revenge on Ben, but Ben turned into Ditto for the first time and defeated Animo once again. Hex came back to look for a way to preserve his youth, and at the same time, we see Max struggling with aging. Hex tried to get to the Fountain of Youth with the help of a young man, and while fighting Ben and Max, these two became children, but still destroyed the Fountain of Youth and defeated Hex. The Tennysons attend the wedding of Max's nephew, but the wedding became a mess when the bride and the groom's families fought. In fact, the two families had a long history of animosity, and the bride's family was actually aliens disguised as humans. Max's van got stolen and was turned into a weapon, but they restored it in the end. Ben got into a ring fight just to get money because he broke Gwen's laptop, but he felt bad because he won against some indebted guys who needed the money more than he did. It also turned out that Gwen tricked him into believing that the laptop was broken. And now for the last episode of the show, where the kid's cousin, Cooper, showed up. They discovered that the plumber's base was broken into in order to get the keys to the sub-energy that creates nuclear energy that the plumbers got in the past, and they protected it. It turns out it was on Mount Rushmore. They went there, but they found all of their enemies together against them under the leadership of an ex-plumber. And of course, Ben managed to destroy that sub-energy and defeated them all in the end. In another episode, which can be considered another last episode, summer vacation ended and Gwen and Ben went back to school. Ben had to keep the Omnitrix a secret, but the school got attacked by robots that also destroyed some parts of the city. When Ben went home, he found that Vilgax attacked his parents, so he had to transform in front of them and reveal his secret. Max, Ben, and his father fought against Vilgax and saved the city, and the whole city discovered his secret. In the next videos, we're going to talk about Ben 10 timelines in a different Ben 10 versions, and mention that people knew about Ben's secret only in Ben 10 Alien Force. In the same timeline, and after 10 years, Ben became 20 years old in a world where both aliens and humans live peacefully. Ben was a hero, and he kept working and fighting all the bad aliens. Ben protected his family and rarely used his human form, and he was also to take the shape of 10,000 aliens. Gwen became a very strong witch. Vilgax was also there and still got defeated by Ben, and in this episode, they went to the future and discovered that it was Gwen who requested them to attend Max's 80th birthday. After 10 years in the same timeline, Ben's son Kenneth celebrated his 10th birthday, so Ben gave him the Omnitrix. His son was a bit disappointed though, because Ben was so controlling of him, but then he met a boy named Devlin, who was, in fact, Kevin's son, and he used him to get out of the Void Prison. Devlin realized that his dad didn't care about him as much as he cared about getting revenge, so after a long fight, Kenneth and Ben sent Kevin back to prison. This was just another timeline that we could have seen in perhaps another season, but we definitely saw a different timeline in Ben 10 Alien Force and Ultimate Alien. What happened could have been different in another timeline where, say, Gwen got the Omnitrix instead of Ben, she was able to use the watch way better than Ben, and defeated Vilgax the same day she got the watch. So I'd say yeah, things could have been way different with her. Anyways, we've now made it to the end of the video, but as a send-off, let's go through the aliens that Ben turned into. We had Heat Blast, Wild Mutt, Diamond Head, XLR8, Gray Matter, Forearms, Stinkfly, Ripjaws, Upgrade, Ghost Freak, Cannonbolt, Wild Vine, Spitter, Buzzshock, Arctiguana, Blitzwolfer, Snarrow, Frankenstrike, Upchuck, Ditto, Eye Guy, and of course, Way Big.
He's got superpowers.
Today, we will cover the show Ben 10 Alien Force from beginning to end. Ben 10 Alien Force is the captivating sequel to the beloved animated series Ben 10 Classic. This time around, we witness the characters in a more mature light. Ben Tennyson, now 15, along with his 16-year-old cousin Gwen and former sidekick Kevin Levin, embark on a thrilling adventure. The story takes place 5 years after the original series, featuring a serialized narrative with an alien conspiracy and the search for Ben's missing grandfather. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. Ben is leading an everyday college life away from fighting aliens and has left his days as Ben 10 behind. One day after college, he walks into the van looking for his grandpa Max, where he finds a hologram with a message. The message says that Max is in a situation and has the Omnitrix, but oddly enough, Ben still has the watch concealed at his place. He shows the message to his cousin Gwen, who by the way is practicing martial arts now, and they encounter Magister Labrid, who claims that Max went missing during a mission, and Ben puts his watch back on to rescue his grandpa. The trio crashes into an illegal trade of bioweapons where we see Kevin handling the business. Ben notices that his watch now has a completely new set of aliens and turns into Swampfire for the first time. After getting restrained, Kevin initially refuses to give out any info about the bioweapons, but has a change of heart after Gwen asks him to help. Kevin leads them to the Forever Knights hideout where they face off against a dragon and some knights. They manage to defeat them, but Magister Labrid gets heavily injured, and before passing away, he asks Ben to locate the source of these weapons. After he dies, Kevin officially joins their team, and Gwen uses her powers to trace the weapons to their source. They locate a mine shaft, and Kevin knocks down the guard on duty, who happens to be a DN alien wearing a photonic display mask. Inside, they discover a huge tower, and Ben uses the mask to disguise himself in order to sneak inside the tower. They destroy the weapon room, but are now surrounded by DN aliens, so Ben turns into Humongousaur and throws them around like kickball. Afterward, they encounter the hybrid commander, who is much stronger than your ordinary DN aliens. The hybrid threatens to destroy a 5-mile radius to erase all witnesses, but Ben manages to stop him and crash his airship. Somewhere else, the hybrid Supreme is informed about the destruction of their flyship and their encounter with Ben 10. Sometime later, Kevin fixes Max's van and runs off with it to sell it for money. Kevin visits his old nemesis Volcanus, seeking a hologram, which he intended to buy after selling the van, but he gets trapped until Ben and Gwen arrive to the rescue. There, they learn that Kevin never intended to betray them and only wanted to help them find Max. The hologram contains yet another message from Max, telling Ben to form a team of people with superpowers, and hence, the recruiting of heroes begins. Sometime later, Kevin's plumber's badge, which he took from the Magister Labrid, pinpoints the location of a nearby badge. The trio heads to the location, where they find a guy named Alan transformed into Heat Blast from the classic show. Ben fights Alan, and after both of them escape from the police, who have been after Alan for a while, he reveals that he's part alien and part human. His father is also a plumber, which would explain the badge he was holding. Kevin tells Gwen how part humans always have some kind of superpower, hinting that Gwen herself is part human. Later, they come across a giant alien-made weather tower and learn that the DN aliens have built these all over the city to make it habitable. They take the tower down and free Alan of all charges, who decides to stay behind and help the local police in catching more aliens. Later, they come across a guy named Michael Morningstar, who also has a plumber's badge. Just exactly what Ben is looking for. Kevin is jealous because Gwen has grown a liking to Morningstar, but they quickly learn that he's not the hero he acts to be. He has been absorbing the life force of girls to become stronger and then controls them as his puppets. Gwen breaks free from his hypnosis and manages to put an end to his madness. Michael returns as Darkstar and tries to absorb the powers of Ben, Kevin, Hybrid, and a plumber. Now, his plan doesn't go very far as the squad defeats him again, and he gets arrested by the same plumber. Kevin and Gwen also receive their official plumber badges and are left responsible for the safety of the planet. Ben asks his crush Julie out on a date, which is ruined by a baby version of the alien upgrade from Ben 10 Classic. The little alien abducts Julie, but she manages to control it. Oh, and she also learns the truth about Ben, which she finds is very amusing. The little alien was only trying to lead them to Basil, who was trapped in an explosion chamber. Ben saves the day once again, and Basil leaves the little one behind, whom Julie names Ship and keeps as a pet. Ship is often used as a means of transportation by the gang throughout the series. Professor Paradox is a time traveler who was sucked into a time machine that he himself created 50 years ago from the current time, which grants him powers to walk through space and time. After meeting him in his lab, the gang fights an age-accelerating alien who turns Kevin into a grumpy old man. But the professor does turn him young again, so no worries. He then explains how a miscalculation from his end sent the alien to Ben's timeline and then shows them how the Earth would look if the alien was left unattended. He cannot simply go back in time and stop the accident from ever happening because, well, that would take away his powers. He even foreshadows the future of Ben with,
"Never mind. It should be here any..."
They travel back in time and learn that the alien is just one of the assistants who got sucked into the machine along with Paradox and turned into whatever that thing was. Ben lets the accident happen, but saves the assistant, hence saving the Earth from that grim future. Sometime later, Kevin tries an experiment on a teleporter, causing it to malfunction, leading the group to a tech nerd, Cooper. Unfortunately, Cooper was attacked by DN aliens and got abducted, so now the trio has to rescue him. His trail leads them to the same place they met Professor Paradox, which is now transformed into a concealed DN alien day camp. Long story short, Cooper is an extremely intelligent mechanic, has telekinesis powers, and is being forced to build alien tech by the DN aliens. The group breaks into the camp and rescues the kid, but is surrounded by a horde of DN aliens. After demolishing the concealment device, they escape the camp, but their business there is not over yet. Now we learn more about Max's whereabouts. One day, they drive to a town called Santa Mira to look for Gwen's brother Ken, who went missing. They trace his steps to a hatchery, where we see Max for the very first time. He sneaks inside and arrives at Ken's torture chamber, but he's just a little too late, as Ken has already been converted into the DN alien. Meanwhile, the trio enters the hatchery and Ben learns that he has to use the watch to revert Ken. They reunite with Max, who reveals the hybrid is making mass shipments to turn humans into alien army, and it is too late for the gang to stop them. Heroically, Max decides to suicide bomb the place in order to erase all the cargo and save humanity, which works for the time being. A few days pass since his death, and the trio visits Max's secret fishing spot in his memory. They spot a cloaked woman placing a rose under a tree, who vanishes when they chase her. They discover a Max plus Verdona engraving on the tree, and Ben says this.
Max plus Verdona? Who's Verdona?
Verdona is an energy being with powers similar to those of Gwen. Somewhere along the line, she and Max grew apart due to their different responsibilities, but the news of his death spread so far in the universe that she came back to mourn the loss. She asks Gwen to come to her planet where she can break the limits of her powers, but after she refuses to go, Verdona goes berserk and tries to force her. However, she backs down and leaves when Gwen explains how much she enjoys her human life. One day, Gwen receives a hologram message from Helen asking for help, and Ben decides to go to Null Void to sort the matters out. Ben learns that the Null Guardians have gone berserk because of a villain named Devoid, who is manipulating them to dig a hole through a dimension. Devoid is Dr. Animo from the Ben 10 Classic show, and Manny and Helen are working for a group they called the Helpers, who work as a resistance to Animo's dictatorship. They take Ben to meet their leader, the Wrench, who happens to be none other than Grandpa Max. Just when you thought this old man was dead, Max reveals that the grenade didn't kill him, but instead sent him here. Max gathers all the Helpers and launches an attack at the dig site, and after they defeat the Doctor, Gwen opens the portal to Earth and Ben steps into it. Max stays behind because he has to finish what he started in the Null Void, but at least they know he's not dead. A few days later, a man named Tyler is being chased by DN aliens when the gang rescues him, and he mentions something about an oscillator key. He takes them to where it's located, and after fighting some aliens, Ben figures that Tyler himself is one of the DN aliens who kept his memories even after turning. Turns out, all the DN aliens are ex-humans, and Ben can save a number of lives if he can find a way to turn them back. The DN aliens arrive to reclaim the oscillator key, which they successfully do, and afterward, Ben uses his watch to turn Tyler back to his normal form, similar to what he did with Ken.
What are you doing?
I'll let you know as soon as I figure it out.
But their mission isn't over, as they still have to stop the hybrid's invasion. But at least they know how to fix the DN aliens. While fighting a hybrid, Ben and he end up on the desert planet named Turawusta, which acts as a routing station for the teleporter they were fighting over. The two work together to fend off all the dangers in the area until night falls, and they start getting along, if only a little. Hybrid introduces himself as Rain Rassig III, and as he keeps watch for the night, they get attacked by an alien which amputates its arm. Ben uses swamp fire to reattach the arm, but he isn't so delighted about it. You see, his species believes that hybrid is the one true species, and all others are abominations. Hence, their ultimate goal is to erase all of them from the universe. Even when they find the teleporter back, Reinrasig stays behind because now he feels impure and wants to live in isolation. Well, I mean, at least Ben knows what awaits them in the future, eh? At Galvin, the hybrid invasion has already started, so Azimuth escapes with Paradox just in time to warn Ben. They mention a hyperspace jump gate, which the hybrids will be using to teleport their army to the Earth. In this need of the hour, Ben sends Kevin and Gwen to recruit all the part humans they aided in the past, just as Grandpa ordered. Omnitrix contains the DNA of millions of species from all across the universe, and it can even be used to restore a species if they're wiped out by the hybrids. Given the risk, Azimuth wants Ben to stay out of the final battle, but Ben refuses, so to increase the chance of his survival, Azimuth unlocks access to every alien and the voice command for Ben. Gwen and Kevin recruit Alan, Cooper, Julie, and Ship, and even Morningstar to come help against the invasion. The gang fights its way through to the hyperspace jump gate, whilst turning hundreds of DN aliens back into humans. Sadly, before Ben can destroy it, the gate activates and the hybrid fleet arrives on the Earth. The trio enters the control tower where Gwen transforms into Anodite and defeats the hybrid, but she cannot stay in this form for long as it will destroy her body. a group of DN aliens surrounds the team, but the helpers, alongside Max, appear just in time and defeat them. Ben decides to visit the Hybrid Supremes himself to negotiate and learns that their obsession with racial purity has led to inbreeding, loss of disease resistance, and sterility. As a result, they are the last generation of their species and want to take down the whole universe with them. Ben uses the Omnitrix to fuse the DNA of every hybrid in the galaxy with random species from the Omnitrix database, repairing their genetic damage and hence giving them another chance at life. However, seeing themselves as impure, they want to end their own race. But remember Reinrasig? Well, he walks in with a mutated arm and convinces them that this way of life is better than dying out. The Hybrid Council agrees and elects Reinrasig as the new Hybrid Supreme, who ends the invasion by recalling the Hybrid fleet from Earth. So, with the power of friendship, Ben saves the world once again. Totally unrelated, but Ben turns into Alien X for the first time on a mission. Alien X has no limitations to his powers, and hence he must become the voice of reason to confront two godly beings, Serena the voice of love and Bellicus the voice of rage, so he can use Alien X's powers. These two have been in an argument for millions of years and have never once agreed with each other, so, good luck, Ben. He does fail to reason with them and decides to never use Alien X again. Somewhere along the line, Ben's parents learn about his powers, and he's forced to explain everything to them. Ben tries to sneak out to help Kevin on a mission, but then this happens.
And you are grounded.
What? You can't ground me! I'm a superpowered alien!
Ben refuses to listen to his parents since Kevin's life is at stake and arrives at the scene to rescue him. Eventually, his parents come around and even help Ben against the DN aliens using one of Max's guns. There's this one episode dedicated to Kevin where he returns to his mother's place only to find it destroyed. She tells him something about an alien called Ragnarok, and this is Max's reaction when Ben asks him about it.
He's out looking for the guy.
We're trying to help.
Then he must have found out.
Found out what?
It started years ago.
Kevin's father, Devin, used to be Max's old pal who died in a plumber's mission while fighting Ragnarok. Devin heroically jumped in front of Ragnarok's attacks and saved Max's life, giving him enough time to grab the Null Void projector and send him there. Devin had stolen a key from Ragnarok, which is the first thing he seeks after escaping from the Null Void. Ben and Gwen want to help, but Kevin is so hell-bent on avenging his father all by himself. Even later, when they follow Ragnarok to his ship, Kevin tricks Ben and Gwen and sends them back to Earth with a space pod. Kevin destroys the control panel and overflows the ship, sending Ragnarok to die out in space all on his own. Alright, and now for the Vilgax arc. Vilgax is back to conquering planets by defeating their strongest heroes and is now absorbing their powers. However, his ultimate goal is to get revenge on a 10-year-old boy who kicked his ass 5 years ago. Siphon, his right hand, arrives at the Earth and creates a dome, which is basically a fighting arena. To make the battle easier for Ben, Kevin tries to hack the Omnitrix to unlock its full potential, but the experiment goes south, causing a huge explosion. Some of Ben's aliens escape from the watch, and now he has to catch them like Pokemon in a 24-hour rush, or they'll vanish forever. Oh, and Kevin has mutated into an amalgam of materials, and he can't transform back to normal. One by one, Ben catches all the aliens and then arrives at the dome to fight his arch-nemesis. He turns into Diamond Head and kicks his ass. I mean, honestly, Vilgax had no chance to begin with. After failing to defeat Ben, Vilgax frees Ghost Freak in exchange for information about the Omnitrix. However, his plan backfires, and now he wants help from Ben. You see, Ghost Freak attacked his planet and turned the people into his minions, and now he wants Ben to help save his race. They arrive at his planet and learn that Vilgax deeply cares about his people as he risks his life to save a little girl. Ben allows Ghost Freak to possess him on purpose and initially loses control of his body. However, Vilgax holds him off until Ben takes over again, and the planet is hence rescued. Vilgax got information out of this whole mission and now seeks the Omnitrix for himself. Sometime later, the trio is teleported by the Omnitrix to a planet named Primus, where Ben loses his watch and follows it to a volcano of sorts. The group finds Vilgax at its core fighting the new wielder of the Omnitrix, who happens to be Azimuth himself. Vilgax manages to steal the watch, but doesn't know how to use it. Azimuth reveals Primus contains the codon stream, a liquid database containing the DNA of all the Omnitrix's aliens, and without it, the watch is useless. When Vilgax arrived at Primus, it felt threatened and summoned the Omnitrix home alongside Azimuth to save its core. Later, Ben tricks Vilgax into turning into goo and then turns off its gravity projector to defeat him. He steals the watch back and throws Vilgax into the codon stream, which turns him into a giant version of himself. Ben transforms into way big to match the size and kicks him back into space. However, he isn't the only one after the Omnitrix. Albedo, a young Galvan scientist and Azimuth's assistant, arrives at Earth and asks Ben to hand over the watch. You see, Albedo wanted to make one Omnitrix for himself, but Azimuth refused, saying that there could only be one of it. So he left the job and made a copy for himself. However, he forgot a tiny little detail. The watch has Ben's DNA by default, which caused him to permanently lose his Galvan form and turned him into an evil copy of Ben. Now he's back on Earth to obtain the real Omnitrix and change its DNA to get his original body back. The two Bens duke it out with each other, which further corrupts Albedo's appearance. But luckily for Ben, Azimuth arrives to save the day and sends Albedo to prison for putting the whole universe at stake. Now, you would think that that's the last of Albedo, but as it turns out, Vilgax helps Albedo out of prison because of a common enemy, Ben Tennyson. The first thing Albedo does is go back to the planet Galvan and steal an incomplete version of the Omnitrix called the Ultimatrix. He is still unable to return to his Galvan form because the alien list is locked by the original watch, so Albedo will have to reset the real Omnitrix. He decides to lure Ben in by abducting Kevin and Gwen, but fails to kidnap Grandpa Max, who warns Ben about Albedo. Max suggests that they wait and recruit the plumber's kids, but Ben immediately heads off to confront Albedo all on his own. Albedo shows the true powers of the Ultimatrix and kicks Ben's ass with the ultimate Humongosaur. Vilgax gives him a choice: hand over the watch or lose your friends, and Ben is forced to give the Omnitrix away. Now, Ben may not have an Omnitrix anymore, but he does have his Grandpa Max, who arrives just in time and takes the gang to safety. Oh, and Vilgax now wants to keep the Omnitrix for himself, which turns Albedo against him. He uses its powers to turn all of his army Humongosaur and attacks Albedo, who gets knocked out after getting overwhelmed. Ben returns to Vilgax and uses Omnitrix's voice command to initiate a self-destruct, and what do you know? He actually blows it up. Since the watch is now destroyed, Kevin turns back to his human form again and regains his powers. Oh, and on a side note, Gwen and Kevin share their first kiss, so, you know, they're officially a couple now. Ben initiates self-destruct on the Ultimatrix as well, and seeing how Ben has already destroyed the Omnitrix, Albedo hands over the watch to Ben. Ben, with his new watch, turns into Swampfire and fights Vilgax, but not before turning into the ultimate version of it. Vilgax tries to crash the ship into the Earth and destroy it using a fusion core, but Max and Gwen divert it from land. His ship hits the ocean, and Ben is forced to fight him underwater, where Vilgax showcases his true form. He attempts to eat Ultimate Swampfire, but Ben escapes by transforming into Jet Ray. Above water, Ben reunites with his teammates, and they watch the exploding remains of the ship. Vilgax has survived, so Ben vows to beat him if he ever shows up again, and hence, our hero saves the day once again. Alright guys, so that was the entire timeline of Ben 10 Alien Force. We may have made it to the end of the video, but let's go through the aliens that Ben turned into. We had Swampfire, Echo Echo, Humongosaur, Jet Ray, Big Chill, Chroma Stone, Brainstorm, Spider Monkey, Goop, Alien X, Nanomech, Lodestar, and Wrath.
Now he's got superpowers, he's no
Today, we're gonna cover the Ben 10 Ultimate Alien series from beginning to end in detail. Ben 10 Ultimate Alien is the third installment of the Ben 10 franchise, following Ben 10 Classic and Ben 10 Alien Force. The story continues just a few months after the events of Ben 10 Alien Force, so without further ado, let's jump right in. The show starts with a bang when Ben's secret identity as an alien superhero gets exposed to the world. His house gets swarmed by the media, causing a huge commotion. The gang tracks down the culprit who spilled the beans, and guess what? It's a 10-year-old kid named Jimmy Jones. He claims to be Ben's biggest fan and thought it would be cool for everyone to know what Ben does for a living. But little did he know, it just made Ben's life way harder. On top of that, they stumble upon some footage of an unknown alien attacking military guards, so they decide to investigate further. They roll up to the military base in Kevin's new ride, where Colonel Rosem tells them that an alien has been sneaking into the camp and swiping parts from their spaceship in progress. When the alien arrives, the Ultimatrix scans it and adds its DNA to the watch. Ben turns into Chromastone to fight him, but much to their dismay, the alien runs away with the fusion core. Now, here's a question. We learned in Ben 10 Alien Force that Azimuth has already stored the DNA of millions of aliens on Galvan Prime. So, why did the Ultimatrix feel the need to scan this mysterious alien for its DNA? Don't worry though, we will learn this soon enough. Anyways, they track down the alien in an underwater cave and discover that he's been swiping parts to repair his spaceship because he desperately wants to get back home. But here's the catch. In order to launch the ship, he'd have to blow up the entire city of Florida, and, well, our heroes are just not about to let that happen. Ben transforms into Ultimate Spider Monkey and restrains the alien, who reveals himself as Bivalven. He came from the Andromeda Galaxy and, along with 4 others, was captured by a guy named Agregor. They managed to escape from him, but got separated and ended up stranded on Earth. So this right here answers our previous question. You see, Azimuth had initially included DNA from aliens within the Milky Way galaxy in the Ultimatrix. However, since Bivalven hails from the Andromeda Galaxy, the Watch needed to obtain a sample of his alien DNA. Okay, now back to the story. So Ben leaves Bivalven restrained in the cave and calls the plumbers for assistance, but sadly, Agregor arrives first and abducts him once again. Now, remember how Bivalven mentioned 4 other aliens that Agregor abducted? Well, sometime later, one of those aliens named Galapagos arrives on Earth looking for Ben's help. You see, his planet was attacked by Agregor, who wanted to absorb the powers of his kind. Galapagos was abducted into his ship, where he met the other 4 aliens, Bivalven, Pandor, Andreas, and Rad. However, this poses yet another question. So Agregor is an Osmosian like Kevin who can absorb powers at will. Why did he feel the need to abduct 5 different aliens when he could simply absorb them on the spot? Well, you see, Osmosians can only attain 10% of the total power when they absorb a creature. However, Agregor has found a way to fully absorb all of their powers. These 5 aliens are super strong. In fact, absorbing the powers of all 5 at the same time would make Agregor the strongest being in the entire galaxy, which is exactly why he brought them onto his ship. However, they managed to escape and crash-landed on Earth. They decided to split up to find help, but we already know how that's going so far. Ben scans Galapagos and sends him home with the plumbers, but little did he know, the plumber was Agregor in disguise. So, 2 down and 3 more to go. Pandor is trapped in this super tough metal armor that contains his powers and keeps his dangerous radiation in check. So desperate to get out, he offers a hefty sum of money to anyone who can crack open his suit. And guess who shows up? Why, it's Kevin! This guy never misses a chance to make a quick buck. However, Kevin refuses to open the suit when his plumber badge detects strong radiation coming from inside. But later, Kevin falls for a trick and accidentally opens the suit, and out pops this glowing, red, lava-like figure, which gets stronger by absorbing energy. Turns out that Pandor is crazy powerful, and the gang realizes they'll need to outsmart him in order to get him back into the suit. Eventually, they succeed in locking him back up and keeping him restrained. Things start looking all under control, and then 2 plumbers arrive to send Pandor back to his home planet. But just as you'd expect, their ship gets attacked by Agregor, who now has 3 out of the 5 aliens in his possession. Wow, things just got a whole lot more intense. But on a side note, Ben has scanned all 3 of the aliens he's met so far, and he even transforms into Water Hazard, which is the species of Bivalven. One cool thing about this show that separates it from the other Ben 10 shows is that this time, we get to see all the new aliens in action even before Ben can use them. I think this is a much better way to introduce new aliens because, well, before that, Ben would only unlock new aliens aliens by accident. Now, even though that was exciting, Ben now has so many aliens now that it would become overwhelming to use the same concept. So, props to the team for making this change. Alright, now let's get back to the plot. So, the next target is Andreas. You see, Andreas is a powerhouse, but a little weaker on the brains end. This is why he has teamed up with Argit, who wants to rule the Forever Knights. And one thing we know about Argit is that he cannot be trusted. I mean, the guy's a jerk. The gang arrives at the castle and learns that Argit uses Andreas's powers to inflict fear upon the Forever Knights, making them steal smoothies and pizzas from all across the city. His kingdom doesn't last long though, because an honorable knight, Sir Dagonet, arrives and turns all of the knights against Argit. He quickly takes off his robe and says that Ben and his team were forcing him to pretend to be the leader of the Forever Knights. See, what did I tell you? This guy just can't be trusted. Nevertheless, Argit and the rest are all put in prison, and Dagonet reveals that Andreas is going to be executed for his crimes. Ben and the rest ambush his execution ceremony, prompting Dagonet to initiate the self-destruct on his weapon and just dip. Seeing that there's no other option left, Andreas selflessly absorbs the explosion and sacrifices himself to save hundreds of lives. However, sometime later, Agrigor arrives on Earth and finds him still barely alive under all the rubble. He takes him back to his ship, and now he is only one step away from achieving his goal. Alright, so the last alien in the group is Rad, who finds out about his friend's capture and blames Ben for allowing it to happen. But here's the thing, all this time, Ben and the gang had no clue about Agrigor's plans. They believed that all the previous aliens had safely returned to their home planets. But guess what? Each time the Ultimatrix scanned those aliens, it unknowingly emitted a homing signal that Agrigor used to track them down. Rad, using his powers, manages to halt the scanning process and vanishes. And wouldn't you know it, just moments later, Agrigor shows up on the scene in search of Rad. Talk about perfect timing, huh? Agrigor proves to be a formidable opponent, overpowering everyone in the group. Meanwhile, Ben finds himself left with just one alien available on his watch, which just so happens to be Rad. In a very clever move, the team manages to escape using Gwen's teleportation spell. But here's the twist. Rad has imprisoned himself within the Ultimatrix, and by doing so, he successfully conceals his presence from Agrigor, who can no longer track Ben since the watch is offline. Now, although Rad's plan is genius, there is a catch. He desires to take over Ben's body permanently, which is something that they just can't allow. The group acts swiftly and removes Rad from Ben's body, but guess what? Agrigor shows up just moments later and starts handing out some serious beatdowns. It's a tense moment, but Rad comes to a selfless realization. He will never be able to escape Agrigor's clutches. So, in a very heroic act, Rad sacrifices himself, willingly surrendering to Agrigor to save the gang. Now, Agrigor has obtained all 5 aliens, but Ben has scanned them all into his watch as well. The stage is set for an epic showdown the next time these two adversaries cross paths. Meanwhile, remember how Agrigor killed a couple of plumbers to abduct Pandor? Well, the plumbers ambush him to retaliate, but he manages to get away. However, before he can fully take off, one of the plumbers attacks Agrigor's ship, destroying his hyperdrive and preventing Agrigor from leaving Earth. The gang is informed about the situation, so they rush to his hideout only to be lured into a deadly trap. Luckily, they all survive, but there is no sign of Agrigor. Sometime later, Colonel Rosum informs them that Agrigor has been planning to use the time machine that they built 50 years ago. Conveniently, Professor Paradox arrives and, well, weirdly enough, he asks Kevin to always remember who his friends are. Oh boy, I hope this doesn't become a major plot twist later. Anyways, the gang breaks into the base, but before they could stop him, Agrigor manages to absorb all 5 of the aliens and becomes the strongest being in the entire galaxy. And as you would expect, Agrigor is unstoppable now, but his hunger for power does not end here. Azmith shows up and reveals that Agrigor is now heading for the Map of Infinity. Now, what exactly is the Map of Infinity? Well, it's kinda like the key to travel anywhere in space or time at will. So yeah, this item is so important that Paradox himself split it into 4 keys and hid them all over the galaxy. Now, Agrigor wants to obtain these keys to become the strongest being in the universe. But how does one become the strongest being by simply obtaining the power to travel through space and time? Well, he plans to use the key to go to the Forge of Creation to obtain unlimited power. The Forge of Creation is the holy grail of power. It's the birthplace of the universe's greatest energy, and it's the place where ideas come to life. This place is hidden away from everyone, except for the Celestial Sapiens, the beings who reside there. It's also the place where Alien X is born, and well, that kinda just explains it. So the gang now has to stop Agrigor from obtaining at least one of these keys. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, that's where things get interesting. The group tries to steal the first key by going into this maze-like temple before him, but doing so means they disarm all the traps for Agrigor to follow. While they're stuck holding a door open for Gwen, he just casually walks in and yoinks that first key. What a total badass! The next key is located at the core of an underwater planet, but this time, Agrigor beats them to it. So that means 2 down and 2 more to go. The gang seeks the help of Charmcaster to follow Agrigor into the Door of Anywhere. The door leads them to a world of mana called Ledger Domain, a place that greatly enhances the powers of mana holders. The two settle their differences and work together to locate the key, but once again, Agrigor uses the group as bait and gets his hands on it. Now, he only has the last key to obtain, and things aren't looking so great for our heroes. So, Azmith does his teleportation thingy and zaps the gang to a whole new galaxy. And guess what? They stumble upon this crazy huge planet called the Perplexahedron, which is shaped like a massive cube. But wait, Agrigor is already on the move, aiming straight for this planet. Our heroes ain't about to let him have all the fun though. They follow him inside, but he manages to slip in using his 3 pieces of the Map of Infinity. Once inside the Perplexahedron, our gang is in for a wild ride. They encounter all sorts of traps and challenges, and finally come face to face with Sentinel, the guardian of the last key. Sentinel knows what's up with Agrigor and hands over the key to Ben. He advises Ben to press on as the place is falling apart, but he doesn't want to leave him behind, so he returns to save his life. I gotta say, not the brightest moment of Ben. He fights Agrigor, but it goes about as well as you would expect. Agrigor now has all 4 pieces of the map, and it's only going to get worse from here on. Azmith isn't too happy about their loss because he himself has no idea where the Forge of Creation lies. But don't worry, because Professor Paradox does. He reveals that Agrigor plans to absorb power from a newborn Alien X in the Forge, which will make him the strongest being in the entire universe. He teleports the gang outside the Forge and leaves them at the entrance, as he cannot go any further. The gang is on their own from there, and they must stop Agrigor before he gets his hands on a baby Alien X. After getting attacked by Agrigor's minions, their ship gets stuck in a field of time, where they encounter a younger Ben. Precisely the Ben from Ben 10 Classic, who is just as obnoxious as I remembered. Anyways, the gang flies to the baby Alien X where they fight Agrigor once again. But just as you would expect, they all get their asses handed over to him. As a last resort, the younger Ben offers Kevin to absorb his Omnitrix, but Kevin chooses to absorb the Ultimatrix instead. With his newly acquired strength, he easily overpowers Agrigor and even absorbs his powers. But in doing so, he loses control of who he is. After Kevin flies off in a rage, Paradox arrives and congratulates Ben for saving the universe. However, his troubles aren't over, because he still has to deal with the Kevin problem. Meanwhile, Kevin has locked himself in the Null Void to seek revenge against the Warden, who was responsible for the death of his friend Quirrell. Quirrell was the only person who showed him kindness and taught him to control his powers. Meanwhile, Ben and Gwen arrive at the prison to stop Kevin, but Ben now wants to kill him after seeing how unpredictable he's become. This leads to a heated feud between Gwen and Kevin, as Gwen wants to help Kevin instead of taking him down. They come across Argit, who reveals that Kevin is out for revenge after being double-crossed multiple times. They bring Argit to a plumber's academy for safety, but Kevin storms in, causing chaos and harming plumbers. He even attempts to kill Ben and Gwen, but ultimately leaves due to their history. Kevin's craving for unlimited power has led him to attack his former allies, such as Alan, Helen, Pierce, Manny, and even Dr. Victor for powers, and Ben has had enough of him. This causes a brawl between the cousins, as Ben ends up knocking Gwen out. This Kevin thing is really taking a toll on our team, huh? Gwen seeks help from Morningstar and uses some spells to give him his original appearance back. She's hoping that Morningstar would come up with a way to help Kevin, and even manages to convince Ben. But Kevin just doesn't seem to be coming around. Oh, and remember that nerd Cooper? Well, this is him now. Cooper, with his genius, builds a machine to absorb Kevin's powers, and Ben gives Gwen an ultimatum of 1 hour before he takes Kevin down for good. After an intense battle, they all manage to restrain Kevin and use Cooper's machine to turn him back to normal. However, Morningstar, of course, tries to double-cross the team by absorbing the power, but Ben had already anticipated that. With the press of a button, he sends the power back to where it belongs, and Kevin returns to his senses soon after. The group not only saves Kevin, but also brings Bivalven, Galapagus, Pandor, Andreas, and Rad back to life. Sometime later, the Forever Knights accidentally break open an ancient seal that was imprisoning Dagon, a legendary mind-controlling creature from another dimension. His release triggers an old man named George, who, until now, resided in a convalescent home. After checking on the seal, George breaks into Area 51 and makes the whole vicinity disappear, leaving only a crater behind. Just who is this freaky old man? Well, later we learn that he's the founder of the Order. Yeah, the original and first ever Forever Knight, who has existed for 1,000 years. When Dagon first appeared 1,000 years ago, he was the one who pulled its heart out using the magical sword. Yet, Dagon did not die. However, the heart was the essence of all of Dagon's power, and it was sealed away somewhere on Earth. So the question is, how did George get his hands on that magical sword? Well, as it turns out, it was Azimuth who created it purely out of curiosity. However, the sword was stolen and used to destroy an entire planet, which made him realize the error of his ways. Later, when Dagon's mind-controlling minions appeared on Earth, all the knights turned against each other. Azimuth chose the knight with the strongest will, who just so happened to be George the Immortal. He gave him the sword called Ascalon to defeat Dagon, and this is how he managed to get his hands on the sword. Coming back to the present, the Forever Knights are holding a council of all their houses to discuss Dagon when George joins in and they all bow to him after recognizing who he is. He reminds them that the Forever Knights existed to eradicate all existing alien life on planet Earth, and unites them to target many aliens, including Pierce Wheels, who is apparently dead now. George appoints Driscoll as his second-in-command and sends him to hunt more aliens. However, Ben kicks his ass and stops the purge. Well, at least for now. Later, George reveals that he's leaving on a quest to find his sword Ascalon, and asks the Knights to be ready upon his return for the battle of 100 lifetimes. While the Forever Knights wait on George to return, a cult called the Flamekeeper's Circle that worships Dagon is formed. These people claim to have found the injured body of the dragon, but upon inspection, Ben learns that it's the injured body of Vilgax from the last episode of Alien Force. Yeah, the once almighty conqueror of the world has been reduced to a half-dead octopus in a fish tank, pretending to be the leader of a cult. Talk about character development, am I right? Anyways, the Flamekeepers are taking him to the heart of Dagon, using which he can obtain all of its powers. Both Forever Knights and the Flamekeepers locate the shrine where they find the magical sword implanted in Dagon's heart. A fight fight breaks between the groups, and Vilgax uses this opportunity to obtain the power of the heart. However, his next destination is the Seal of Dagon, which will grant him even more strength. Vilgax disappears after cracking the seal, but all hope is not lost, as George has gotten his hands on Ascalon, the magical sword he used to defeat Dagon the first time. Sometime later, an all-out war breaks out between the Forever Knights and the Flamekeeper's Circle because one group wants to free Dagon while the other wants to kill it. When George reaches the seal, he's confronted by Vilgax, who now works as a herald to Dagon. The seal breaks and Dagon returns, but as it turns out, Vilgax never intended to serve him. In fact, he had this machine prepared to absorb Dagon's power. Meanwhile, George tries to fight Dagon, but dies in the process, and then Vilgax arrives with his machine and becomes the new Dagon. Wow, a lot happened real quickly, huh? Ben fights Vilgax, but not by using the Ultimatrix. Instead, he's using the sword George left behind. In the end, Ben manages to absorb all of Dagon's power from Vilgax, and Vilgax urges him to use this power to eradicate all evil from the world. With such tremendous power at his disposal, Ben really considers Vilgax's advice. But in the end, he remembers everything he's been through and uses this power to undo all the destruction caused by Dagon. Seeing as Ben has matured so much, Azmith arrives and gives him a new version of the Ultimatrix for the next show to come. Alright, so that right there was the entire timeline of Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. But you guys remember Ben 10,000, right? Well, in this crazy future, he gets attacked by a guy called Eon, who's on a mission to hunt down Bens from different dimensions. But guys, don't worry. Ben 10,000 kicks his butt and saves the day. Just when he thinks he's done, Paradox shows up and, well, tells him that his troubles have only just begun. He teleports Ben 10,000 into the present, where they meet our regular 16-year-old Ben. On a side note, this Ben 10,000 is from a different future than the one with whom Ben met when he was 10 years old. Anyways, the two try to destroy a portal that Eon can use to travel in this time, but it turns out that it was a trap set by him to activate the seal. As both Bens fight Eon, they learn that all of his minions are mind-controlled 16-year-old Bens from different timelines, and that Eon himself is a Ben 10,000 from a different dimension. So basically, this version of Ben 10,000 went evil, and he abducted other Bens to use as his slaves. Soon after, the evil Ben 10,000 is defeated when his seal is destroyed, which also reverts all the damages he has caused in different dimensions. Before leaving with the good Ben 10,000, Paradox gives a warning to the team about the creature from beyond. Alright folks, we've finally made it to the end of the video, but let's go through the aliens that Ben turned into. We had Water Hazard, Amphibian, Armadillo, Terraspin, NRG, Fast Track, Chameleon, Eagle, Clockwork, Shock Squatch, and Jury Rig. This was the timeline of Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.